Councillor Skelly.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. I'll start, I guess, and this would help me frame perhaps my ongoing questions, and that is, what does, well, there you have it there, light rail transit. LRT stands for light rail transit. Why do we treat this project as a light rapid transit as opposed to light rail transit? Because when I look at the design that you're putting forward, it's so restrictive in terms of any sort of movement of vehicular traffic. It stops becoming light rapid when it moves along, is it James Street? James Street to the West Harbour Terminal. So why are we pushing a light rapid transit as opposed to light rail?
So through the Deputy Mayor, the term LRT is really about the mode it is. So instead of bus rapid transit, it's in this case we're talking about rail, and so that's the mode of it. Along the B line, so the east to west portion, we have always, in terms of our planning and our systems approach to it, felt that there needs to be a rapid transit approach, and we have that now. The B line express bus service is an express bus service. But protecting for the future growth of the population and the congestion that will follow with that, LRT offers an opportunity to maintain that rapid approach to the transportation on the east-west link, where we've always felt that that was really important, and that's been, endorsed in the reports that come forward. Where we struggled a little bit was this new north spur piece. It's a very short piece, and why you would need it across 11 kilometers, or it's just over 11 kilometers end-to-end east-west, is that obviously slowing this down and being at the mercy of traffic across 11 kilometers over time will really slow you down. For a very short spur that's heading north, that becomes less of a challenge, and quite frankly the ridership differences between what's happening on that little spur versus what's happening on the B line is night and day. So the approach on the two lines is different, but we have not deviated from the fundamental approach that has been in place and in thinking since our rapid transit project started along the B line. That hasn't changed. What was new for us was the A line spur. And our recommendation, to the technical team, is that run with a different style and not be that segregated running. So you're quite right, it will be slower and it's at the mercy of traffic, but because of its distance and because of the ridership along that, it was felt that running style was the thing to be proposed. Could change. There's nothing stopping us from segregating that LRT as well and having it run in the same style as the B line LRT.
Who makes the final determination on the plan?
So it goes through a series, through the Deputy Mayor, it goes through a series of consultations. The community has to have that consultation in it. Committee and council will have the opportunity to talk to us about what works and what doesn't work in terms of the alignment and the ultimate design of this. So those types of information pieces come to this group. And at the end of the day, as co-proponents on the EA addendum with Metrolinx, we will be seeking approval next late winter into the just about the turn to spring, seeking approval to submit the environmental project report to the provincial government. And so, of course, we need to be on the same page in terms of what we're submitting as our EA addendum.
So who makes the final approval of the plan? Is it the city? Is it you? Is it Metrolinx?
So through the Deputy Mayor, the one person it absolutely isn't is me. This is not something that staff alone can submit. So in terms of the overall design that's being submitted for EA approval, we are co-proponents on that. There will obviously be decision making that happens at Metrolinx to support the submission of that, and then the city, through you, would have to also make that approval.
Can the Metrolinx override our decision?
Through the Deputy Mayor, they can't override a decision of council, no.
So in terms of final design, the city has the final say in the design and the route and all of the bits and pieces of the line.
Through the Deputy Mayor, you would provide approval to us as staff to either go forward and submit or not submit under the EA. So yes, there are some, and why I say it in that way is that there are certainly some elements that when you look at what Metrolinx is responsible for, what we're responsible for, that we have our roles and responsibilities to play. Metrolinx, for instance, can't make unilateral decisions on city-owned assets. That's your final call. But there could be other elements that we may say, well, if that doesn't change, we won't support it. But we can't actually tell Metrolinx certain things. We would have to say we're not comfortable submitting this plan around the LRT forward until we make those tweaks that satisfy us as a council.
Clarify again, I'm a little confused. Are you having buses as well as the trains on the route, especially through the International Village? Will buses be using that route as well?
So the absolute, through the Deputy Mayor, the absolute is there'd be no Beeline Express service for sure. That would be replaced by the LRT. How the local bus service that right now is run in concert with the Beeline Express, how that is mapped out, we're still working through the bus redeployment and the strategy around how local bus service operates in conjunction with LRT. So I can't give you a definitive right now. It's not our expectation that we would be running local service along the Beeline as well, but that's not a definitive. What is definitive is this obviously replaces the Beeline Express service from a bus capacity, but the local service we're still working through.
Through the chair, would it be fair to say that some of these stops are very far apart and might be onerous on some people who have mobility issues?
Through the Deputy Mayor, yes.
How do you address that?
Through the Deputy Mayor, we'll certainly look for some input around stop spacing and stop location through the process. We want to start somewhere. There is obviously a desire not to have stops as frequent as a local bus service, but we need to hear back from you and from the public around that. And there's ways to make this work, from balancing rapid and reliable transit with the access to the station stops. So I'm sure we'll hear through that. The original design and how many stops were there, and we're a little shy of what was originally proposed, and so we may hear some of that as it goes through.
Through the chair, is there a huge cost associated with additional stops in terms of perhaps infrastructure?
Through the Deputy Mayor, not if we're talking, in a couple. If we start to talk, and the reason I say that is I have had some emails and calls from the community saying, I think we should be looking at, 25 stops, 30 stops along there. That would be, A, not in keeping with what light rail transit is supposed to do, and secondly, that would get cost prohibitive. But there's enough flex that if there was some readjustment to stops or an addition of one or two, that it would certainly be fit well within our budget discussions. We'd obviously, we're not sure exactly where we net out yet. We have to do some more detailed costing on it. But if you're talking about one or two tweaks, that's something that's in the realm of possibility. If it's adding 10 or 12 stops, I would suggest to you that would be outside of what we could handle within budget.
Through the chair, how much time are we saving having the limited number of stops and treating this as a rapid service?
Through the Deputy Mayor, you'd be protecting the service running time somewhere in the mid-20s in terms of minutes end to end. So it's less about saving time today, it's about protecting that time long term. That would be the relative running time. Do I say forever? For a long period of time, decades, and it wouldn't be impacted regardless of what the increased volume of traffic as the community grows does as well. So, as you know, along certain routes now, timing gets delayed as congestion and traffic grows. So we'd be protecting it. Our estimates are it's somewhere in that mid-20 range moving end to end.
Is there, in your estimation, a bit of a conflict when we're proposing the spur line as not rapid, it's just rail, it's not going to expedite the service, in fact, it will probably slow it down. But the argument I hear consistently by people who are in support of LRT is how sexy a train is versus a bus, and that is one of the key drivers in attracting and building this service. Is that enough of an argument? I mean, we're not. Why don't we just have buses? If it's not helping improve time, which it can't be on the spur, Why are we not just switching to buses there? Why are we continuing? And if it's not about time, then why don't we just treat this as a light rail transit, have numerous stops, don't have the elevation, allow cars to cross keep the current route, just treat it as rail and not worry so much about this rapid part of the argument, because we're ignoring it once we head down to the West Harbour. Is that not correct?
Well, through the Deputy Mayor, in terms of what the city has put forward for a long period of time, the B line was always to contemplate a rapid transit approach. The question back in the day was whether that would be bus rapid transit, which quite frankly is segregated in much the same way. If you look at Ottawa, they're actually converting some of their bus rapid transit right-of-ways, segregated right-of-ways, to their rail. So the question was whether it's bus rapid transit or light rail transit. And in fact, some of the benefit case work that was done by Metrolinx indicated that overall there were more benefits achieved by going with the light rail. So in answer to why rail and not buses, along the B line it was really about what mode of rapid transit. You are quite right that along the A line it is a different approach to it. I've given you the reasons why we've thought through that. The A line could run as a different style of service, but quite frankly, we were funded to provide LRT down to West Harbour, and so we found the best way to do that technically. In terms of why trains, and you made the comment about is this, just a more attractive mode of transportation, there certainly is evidence that ridership does increase by a factor beyond bus rapid transit. And Trevor Horzellenberg, who's been with this project for a long time and certainly is deeply embedded in this and has been through it. Trevor, maybe you can talk just a little bit about the light rail versus the bus rapid transit, because that's a conversation that has been going on for a number of years that we finally came through the end result of in 11 and 12.
Through the chair to the councillor. That's correct. That debate has happened for over 8 years. I've been involved in the rapid transit file for probably about 6 years, and that argument always comes up. And it's yes, is the LRT kind of sexier, or it brings more investment dollar, or that sort of thing. It's in some way it's inconclusive. However, there are some facts that I could put on the table in regards to an LRT actually rides a lot smoother. You don't have the bumps and from a bus. There's and also in a segregated corridor, and I think that's really what you kind of focus in on, is that the segregation, it really gives the reliability, and that drives transit ridership. Is if you have a reliable system that people can access. So. As for just BRT versus LRT, it's kind of like there's people on both sides of the fence, and I can't say that one way or the other is a benefit, but it's a matter of just kind of what the funding that was given to the city in regards to the LRT proposal.
Thank you. Through the chair, I will mention that I spoke with officials at York Region last week about Viva. And they said they chose the BRT system, which they have seen development along the route as well. And they chose BRT leading up down the road to considering LRT, but they wanted to have the ridership up before they invested in LRT. Why are we restricting the number of stops, and more importantly, why are we preventing vehicular traffic from crossing over? Because I can see a mess in the downtown core trying to navigate around the downtown in a vehicle with what you're proposing now with the elevation and the physical borders and preventing traffic from crossing over King Street.
So through the Deputy Mayor, just to talk about elevation, so the curb for sure in some case would be there. To be honest, in all likelihood, the LRT will actually probably drive right at the ground level. There won't be an elevation of the train to any height, because at each intersection or pedestrian crossing, you would actually have to bring the train down to the flat level, because you don't want people having to step up and walk over a raised guideway for the LRT. So in that case, we're not fully there yet. What would be there is this small curb, which would deter the traffic. It goes back to what we're trying to achieve on the B line, and that is that this is a rapid and reliable service. Whether it was BRT, it still would have been the same. It's curbed, it's everything else. Whether it's LRT, it's curbed, and we limit the movements. If you look at Toronto, they've been doing some of that work as well. You have the U-turn sections to allow traffic to get to the other side. It is a change in behavior, and it's a change in service patterns in terms of driving, but not completely unique to what Hamilton is trying to do. So I keep coming back to, this was a corridor to provide a rapid transit service. We do that today with an express bus service, but that can't be protected in terms of its rapidness over time. That's where either the LRT or the BRT came in. And the direction was to move to an LRT system in Hamilton. Yes, some other communities have done BRT first, and that's, the Ottawa is a great example of that. They're actually just converting the right-of-way that BRT ran on, laying track, and now it's going to be LRT. That was an option that certainly could have been discussed and put forward, but what was put forward was about LRT, and that's what's been funded.
Through the chair, how many roads will be impacted? In other words, turns. How many roads will be blocked from vehicular traffic crossing over? Left turns.
So the number of, so through the Deputy Mayor, the number of no left turns, I'll have to provide you with that precise number. There's a number, obviously, in the eastern end of the piece, particularly when you get onto the main east part of this. There are lots of small roads. A good friend of mine used to live on Cameron, so it's the one I use most often as the example. But you've got Cameron, you've got Cope, you've got other streets moving along there. So there's more in certain areas and less in others. In some areas, it's no different. We do have medians that run along Main West, which restrict left turn movements now. Some streets are already right in, right out. And don't forget that when we hit the Delta and move, today, the entire north side of King Street is right in. Or right out, sorry, because they can't turn left onto King. So in some cases, we're adding movements that cars can't do. In other cases, we're changing where those movements can occur. But in terms of your specific question, we'll get you the number of restricted left turns or crossings across King and Main East. We could get you that actual number. I just don't want to guess at it right here.
I would like that number, and the names of the streets, actually. Each street that will be prevented from turning left. Who will be operating? Who's paying for the operational costs going forward once it's built?
So through the Deputy Mayor, in our memorandum of agreement, we set out that this may be a design, build, finance, operate, and maintain approach, which may mean that there is a third-party operator. It's the way things are working, for instance, in Waterloo, that there is a part of the consortium is actually an operator for the consignment period. In terms of the operating impact cost to this community, we are working with Metrolinx and Metrolinx with the Ministry of Transportation around the operating and maintenance agreement. And so when we have more detail on that, that will come back as an agreement to understand what those impacts are. There are, of course, a number of revenue and expense pieces related to transit in this community and related to this project that have to be taken into account. And so you will see that work. We're not there yet. And in fact, there's some policy level discussions that are happening with the ministry level at the moment on a number of these projects. So we're not even in a position where we can sit down and start negotiating, but we will do that, and we will have those answers for council before we would be, signing any construction agreements and consortium agreements moving forward. Toronto is in a situation where they're actually building some of this, and they still haven't pinned down all of those pieces. That's not the approach that's going to be taken on the projects. I understand from Andrew Hope from Metrolinx, in terms of here Ontario ourselves, Finch even, that we're not going to get ourselves into that position. So you'll see that. I just don't have that information today.
Through the chair, so we're sitting here arguing about or discussing $1 billion investment in project, and we have no idea who is going to pay to operate it. At this point, we have no confirmation who's going to operate and cover the cost of LRT. Is that correct?
Well, through the Deputy Mayor, no, we have some of that is in place. The contract and Metrolinx's work, and I may add Andrew to add a bit of context to that, includes all sorts of some of this cost. It's not a decision whether the city will pick up all the cost or somebody else will pick up all the cost. But in netting out all of the issues that exist, including issues around gas tax money and some of those pieces, we have to work out with Metrolinx what the final deal is that's on the table. Because, for instance, if someone else is operating as part of our system, we also have some issues with integrating of our conventional transit system with this. So there's a series of things, and I don't know, Andrew, whether you want to share any more or have I covered it off. You can just nod if I've covered it off well enough at this point. So we know that there's money built in, and Metrolinx understands from their contract, and when this goes to the market, some of the operating and maintenance costs will be covered within that. But there's going to be a bit around the edge that we have to work out with Metrolinx in terms of what the impact on this community would be.
Through the chair, I would like Andrew, perhaps, if it's possible, or someone to clarify what is covered under this agreement. I don't know. These are very vague terms. What are we covering? What are we responsible for? What is Metrolinx covering? Where is the gas tax money going? What do we know today in terms of who is going to be paying for what once this is built?
Well, through the Deputy Mayor, from a city perspective, I'll let you know we don't have any of those details right now, and Andrew can talk maybe a bit about the process around that.
Thanks, Paul. Through the chair, I would just say at this point, we have 100% funding commitment for the capital costs of constructing the project, and that's similar to the commitment the province has made through Metrolinx to projects in Ontario and Mississauga, at the Eglinton Crosstown project in Toronto, and the Finch West LRT project in Toronto. So similar situation. Regarding operations and maintenance costs, no decisions have been made at this point as to exactly how those costs will be apportioned. That would, as Paul indicated, that would be the subject of negotiations between the city and Metrolinx that will be taking place in the coming months. And that covers a wide field. As Paul indicated, there's many pieces that come into play in those negotiations. There's the actual operations and maintenance costs of the LRT. There's the impacts that would have on the city, the gas tax revenue the city receives from MTO. And the impact generally on existing bus routes and revenues from existing services that operate in the corridor. So there's a complex set of things that need to be worked through with the city and Metrolinx. We will be doing that in conjunction with our partners at the Ministry of Transportation over the coming months. And as Paul said, the commitment here is to get to a proposal on this and a recommendation from the city and Metrolinx before we get to a final decision on going forward with construction.
And Mr. Deputy Mayor, if I can add that, right from the very early stages of the conversation as the announcement was being made, our city manager has also been stressing with the CEO of Metrolinx that this is something that cannot be continued to be kicked down the road too far, that we need to understand as a city, and you need to understand as the decision makers what the impact is. But there are just a few pieces that we have to sort out before that happens, and some of it also is about alignment and the discussions we've had. So this also gets that going. And but I just wanted to chime in that this isn't the first time we're raising it with Metrolinx. It's been raised right from the beginning by our city manager.
Through the chair, and that is what concerns me. We don't know the details, and I think it is almost too late at this point to not know what the deal is as we move forward. I'm not sure why, but why is our material that's being put forward now you've changed even the color scheme and everything on the light rail transit? Is it going to be a Metrolinx then look on all of the trains, or are we going to have the HSR branding? Because I've just noticed a shift recently to the green from our original designs.
So through the Deputy Mayor, the branding and marketing, namings of stops and everything else is to be determined as we move on. These are all indicative pieces around it. So.
Another question, and do you know how much it costs per kilometer to build the actual line itself? Is there a cost broken down per kilometer?
Through the Deputy Mayor, no, I mean, you can reverse engineer that number once you kind of know what it is, but it's a wide range, and really what we're doing is we're actually breaking down each element of it. So you would have subsurface costs, you would have your actual guideway costs, you've got all sorts of these costs broken down. There is, and of course, what changes that, so why you can't just say it's this, is if we were just putting down the guideway and the rails and everything else, it'd be pretty straightforward to say this is your cost. But what's difficult is when we get underground and start to look at the utilities and the relocates and all of those pieces, there becomes a variability that's different in every community. So those are the kinds of pieces that can skew you one way or the other. So some of the costs fairly straightforward, but many of the costs not. So we're building that costing model now that we have our alignment to understand where we are relative to that funding envelope.
From what I understand, actually reading in the CBC this morning, this money is committed strictly to LRT outside of the GTHA. Money from the big, is it the $34 billion that the province determined would go to the big move. We had to spend it on rapid transit, BRT or LRT. Could we shorten the route and redirect some of the funds? For example, we've already shortened the route from Eastgate. Could we shorten it to perhaps the International Village and say any savings could be redirected to feeding in the line with additional buses across the city? Is that possible?
To the Deputy Mayor, no, it's not possible to change the running style from LRT to BRT, nor is it possible to create a hybrid project that would do other things within our transit or infrastructure system. This funding is for the project as announced and for the style of transit as announced. And
another question is about the reliability or the accessibility of the trains themselves. Bombardier is so far behind in delivering its trains to other cities across the province. Do we have any guarantee? Do we have any idea where we would stand in terms of being able to actually get trains to run on the line?
Well, through the Deputy Mayor, to be honest, we're not actually bound under the contract with any vehicle at the moment. So Metrolinx will. There's a couple of ways it could go. It could be the vehicles that are being used in other projects and continue on. And I think there's less talking to Waterloo, who are, of course, very nervous about that because they go into operation next year. Their concern level is not the panic that I thought it might be reading some of the news feeds around it, nor is Toronto's under an acute issue with some of their aging infrastructure and the vehicles. But the short answer is we're not bound under that. There's a couple of ways it could go. It could be those vehicles. It could be that actually the consortiums that come together could be responsible for the types of vehicles that are there. So again, that's something that would come forward, but there's not the panic in even the projects that are underway eyes that they won't have vehicles. Andrew, I'm looking at you if you have anything more to add to that. Through the Deputy Mayor, maybe Andrew is the Metrolinx rep.
Yeah, through the chair, I would just say no decisions, as Paul said, no decisions have been made at this point on what exact vehicle will be used for this project. We're considering what our options are. We do have a contract with Bombardier to deliver vehicles for the Eglinton and Finch projects. Here, Ontario and Hamilton are not part of that contract, but we would have options if we did want to secure tag on to that original order, but we haven't made that decision at this point.
And maybe you can clarify for me, if or explain what the deal says. When we open up the roads and we decide to change the infrastructure, there are pipes that have to be replaced, the road's going to be repaved, blah, blah, blah. Who's paying for what? And what happens if we discover something that is outside of what we predict right now? Who covers the cost of all of those infrastructure costs?
So through the Deputy Mayor, all the project costs are borne by Metrolinx, and so where there's movement of utilities, absolutely they are concerned about the risk of that from a budget and schedule perspective, but are prepared to work through that as they are with every project. Where the city does have some decisions to make is in cases where we may want to enhance what's there while the road's open, or we actually absolutely, from a growth perspective, know that we have to expand service in some capacity. We would be required to pay for the incremental cost of that. The example I use, I don't know whether we have any 6-inch pipes, but if we go from a 6-inch pipe to a 9-inch pipe, we pay for the 3 inches to go to the 9 inches. The 6 inches is covered as part of the project cost. So I just had Andrew had set up a meeting for us Tuesday morning, yesterday, to talk through some of the folks that are working from a technical perspective on other projects. And once you get underground, absolutely, you find things you didn't anticipate. You find condition of utilities that is different from what was anticipated, whether it's the city or third-party utility providers. And we have to find solutions for all of those. It is the same on every project. You work through that. And those things are built in as tolerances within our budget. But that's why we're doing the technical work right now to bore, to get cameras down, to try and figure out what we do know already from our public works staff and our third-party utility providers, and then the other pieces that we need to issue manage as they come forward. So.
Can I hear from Metrolinx what the commitment is by Metrolinx to cover the costs of our infrastructure? And I mean, we make reference to one pipe that going from increasing from 6 to 9 inches, but do we have any sort of a guarantee or written confirmation of what Metrolinx is willing to cover?
Through the chair, I would just refer to the language that we included in the memorandum of agreement, which was very clear on this. So we will replace like-for-like infrastructure. So anything that needs to be relocated as a result of the project, we will pay for that. As Paul indicated, if the city decides at the same time that they want to make upgrades or enhancements to infrastructure that's under the road, the city would pay for the incremental costs associated with that infrastructure upgrade. So that is laid out in the MOA.
Through the chair, maybe there's somebody else from the city that can speak to what our perceived savings or costs would be to this. We hear that this is going to be an advantage. We're going to be saving money because Metrolinx or this project will replace outdated infrastructure. What is the real case in terms of dollars? Do you have any idea?
To the Deputy Mayor, that's the things we're working through still with Paul's group in looking at what size of pipes we need and things like that, and utilities and what has to be relocated. So we don't have that kind of detail yet. A lot of that work, though, over time, we would be required to do as a city, regardless of whether the project goes ahead or not. So that's a consideration.
Through the chair, if we replace a pipe, for example, change one from 6 inches to 9 inches, do we then have to tap into other pipes in the city and start expanding our infrastructure around the LRT project and absorbing costs that we hadn't planned? And I don't know if I'm speaking clearly enough, but in other words, are we going to have to start replacing other pipes that we hadn't planned simply because we've done the work along the LRT line?
Through the Deputy Mayor, part of the utility work and the public works infrastructure work will be to look at where we expect growth to take place and where we need to anticipate for that growth and time that work to happen when the road, if necessary, when the road is completely open to do that. So you're quite right. In theory, there could be some other pieces that need to change. It's not as a result of LRT. It really would be as a result of the city understanding what our growth is around this area and along the corridor. And of course, those are decisions that you would make. Again, it's not a decision that's made by myself or by Metrolinx to say, no, you will do it because of this. It's our decision to make as a city. If we choose to stay in place with what's there, things will be relocated, things will be, and as a result, some of it may be replaced. But all of those discussions and decisions would happen through committee and council.
Through the chair, I have one final question. Perhaps I could, the gentleman from Metrolinx could answer this. Were other municipalities across Ontario given the option on how to spend this infrastructure money?
Through the chair, so I guess what I would say to that question is the funding that's been provided for this project is being provided through the Moving Ontario Forward Fund, which has inside GTHA components and an outside GTHA component. Within the GTHA component, the funding is for rapid transit. Outside the GTHA, which covers obviously, rural, remote areas as well as central Ontario and southern Ontario, there are different priorities that were established for that fund, but that is sort of goes beyond our role at Metrolinx.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Skelly. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Paul, for your presentation. I really appreciate